What's up, Earth Rockers? It's your boy Shovatar here, and I am here today to talk about Castlevania 64, and I am really, really excited to talk about this one, but I think I'm going to be quiet for a little bit and just let the opening narrator do his thing.
Transylvania, in the mid-19th century, the province of Wallachia. In this time of peace and plenty, no one foresees the return of ancient horrors. But the old legends live, and soon the land will again be plunged into darkness. The people have returned to the path of wickedness, and the bonds that seal their evil ruler's spirit are weakening. Reinhardt Schneider, heir to the ancient Belmont clan of vampire hunters. His blood dooms him to oppose the might of Count Dracula. Wielding the holy whip of his ancestors, the young vampire killer begins his quest.
I like the two exclamation marks at the end there. I also like that they apparently couldn't get him to read out like the whole intro. I don't even know where to start with this game. Um, if you want to take a nice little, well, let me give some context just in case somebody like has no idea what this game is and like what its reputation is. This game, in terms of my understanding of it, has a pretty abysmal reputation. I think this mostly comes in the modern era from people who watched the Angry Video Game Nerd all the way back when he was making his early videos. He had a big video series about the whole Castlevania series, and he talked at the very end about Castlevania 64, and in the way that he does, expressed many, many frustrations with the game, and ultimately stopped playing it at about the halfway point. Before, in my opinion, before the best parts of the game, I think this game gets better as it goes along, but due to that sort of negativity that surrounded it, and due to the game's sort of visible wonkiness and some of its extreme, absolutely undeniable flaws, it does kind of have a reputation as a bad game. So my expectations going into Castlevania 64 were at the rock bottom. Like I was expecting something borderline unplayable. I was expecting to like not be able to ever see what I was doing. I wasn't even planning on playing this game the way that I played the other games, like doing deathless runs and then commentating them. I almost thought about just doing like a let's play. Like I would just record a full playthrough of it and just do some kind of like live commentary, because I didn't think I'd be able to learn the game well enough to ever do a consistent deathless run, because I expected it to just be non-stop horseshit. That's not quite how things turned out. So that was my like mindset going into it, was I'm just gonna try this and I'm gonna see how it feels, and I'm gonna see if it feels like viable to play it in the way that I normally do. And I kind of realized as I went through it that that something about this game was weirdly compelling to me. And it's hard to describe exactly why. So that's kind of part of what I'm going to try to do here as I talk about this footage, is talk about, try to sort of backtrace my feelings for this game, because I actually ended up really liking this game. It was completely the opposite of what I was expecting. Well, the game itself wasn't completely the opposite of what I was expecting, but my reaction to it was not what I was expecting at all. And I got to explain something actually about the early game real quick before I get back to talking about it in a more general sense, which is that I'm going to be playing the first part of this game pretty quickly. Like, you're going to see me just kind of go through these first few levels as fast as I possibly can. There's a couple reasons for that. First of all, this first level, the Forest of Silence, is probably twice as long as it should be. I think it kind of goes on for too long. The main reason is because Castlevania 64 operates on an internal day-night cycle, and there's a particular cutscene that you have to get to in order to progress the game's story that only becomes available at a certain time of day. And if you don't get to it at that certain time of day, then you would have to wait a whole other in-game day to see it again. So what I really want to do is I want to get to the point where that cutscene is within a certain time frame, to make sure that I see it as basically on the earliest possible time that I can. And that means doing these first levels really fast. So that's why I'm going to be like jumping around a lot and like not really fighting most of what pops up. It's for that reason, and I'll point out the cutscene when I get to it. That's kind of the only time when the day-night cycle is going to be super relevant. Something to note about Castlevania 64. Well, I guess I should talk about how the game is like structured. So what's fascinating about Castlevania 64 to me is the time frame when it came out, because this is 1999. 2 years prior to this, I mean, well, technically the last Castlevania game to come out was Legends before this, but Legends like doesn't like fuck Legends. The last Castlevania game to come out that mattered was Symphony of the Night. So you go from Symphony of the Night, which is this like 2D, you know, sort of looks like 16-bit looking Igavania like RPG element side scroller, and then you go from that to this full 3D wonky, pretty much no RPG elements except for like an inventory screen, platformer. And this game is very centrally a platformer. That's kind of like what the game is based around, more so than the combat, because the combat is very janky, and you are kind of often put in an awkward situation of trying to face in the direction you want to face in like close quarters melee combat is really tough. So the combat mostly works if you're in a situation like the situation I find myself in a lot in the Forest of Silence, where if there's just an enemy right in front of me and I can just jump at it and whip it, and like it doesn't try to like close distance with me or doesn't like fucking fly all over the place, then I'm pretty much fine. But the combat is generally very simple, and none of the combat challenges that the game presents are particularly demanding. Mostly the source of danger in the game and kind of the central feature that the game enjoys so much is the platforming. So it's a very, very stark contrast between Symphony of the Night and this game. And if you look up, this is funny, if you look up contemporary reviews of the game, because I said that this game had acquired a negative reputation, I want to point out something that just happened there, by the way, because that's one of this game's problems. This is a more minor problem, but I'm going to point it out. Is I accidentally picked up the knife there when I wanted to hold on to the cross, because I was trying to pick up the gems, because the game has gems instead of hearts as sub-weapon currencies. Tried to pick up a gem, accidentally picked up a knife. Very, very frustrating. I really think what they should have done is made it so that if you just walked over anything else, like money or gems, you automatically picked it up, but make you press the interact button to pick up sub-weapons, because that would prevent that from happening. That werewolf fight also was probably like the smoothest werewolf fight I've ever gotten, because the way that fight tends to go is he like jumps around and flies around all over the place, and you're desperately trying to wrangle the camera around to look at him, and then by the time you look at him, he's like spazzing out and jumping around somewhere else again. So it's really hard to fight that guy, because it's just hard to see him because he's just moving around so much. But there he kind of behaved himself, and I was able to fight him a little bit less awkwardly. So yes, the skeleton fell into the water. I thought that was funny. So centrally a platformer, basically like from a different universe to Symphony of the Night. And what's funny is that if you go back and look at contemporary reviews of this game, this is what I was starting to say before. Castlevania 64 has a negative reputation now, but at the time that it first came out, the game was actually fairly warmly received. Like gaming magazines, and you can take this with a grain of salt, because even back in '99, gaming magazines were kind of like, I feel like publications, if a game has a certain amount of profile, then a publication is very rarely going to give it like a really atrocious score. But anyway, publications are giving this things like 8.9 or like 8.5, like 9, 9.5, like really good reviews for this game when it first came out. And it's funny because if you read some of the reviews from that era, they like talk about it in contrast to Symphony of the Night, and basically the extent of their criticisms is like, Symphony of the Night is bad because it's 2D and looks like SNES. This game is much better because it's in 3D. It's like insane to read that shit. Um, it's just such a cartoonish example of the sentiment of the time. And to make myself totally clear, I do not think this game is better than Symphony of the Night. I'll just state that right up front. Um, and you might wonder if you're really familiar with my videos and my opinions, which you probably are not. I'm a guy who doesn't really like platforming. I find combat challenges to be much more interesting than platforming. I also want to point out skeletons on motorcycles. And this is so terrible, by the way, what's going on here. Because, okay, so here's why this part is like a shit show. Because when you're in the boss, when you start the boss fight, the camera is now centered on the boss at all times. And that's supposed to be helpful, because it's supposed to make sure you always know where he is and you never lose track of him. But by having you fight the boss and then spawning those two motorcycle skeletons at the same time, now you can't see the motorcycle skeletons, so you kind of just have to listen for the engine revving to try to figure out where they are, which is an imprecise science. Random drop there, making up for my accidental pickup of the knife before. So that's like a perfect example of when the camera in this game like malfunctions, is when it can't figure out like what it wants to show you. Or rather, when it's like it thinks you should be looking at one thing when you really want to be looking at something else. That's when the camera is at its absolute worst, and that's not a problem as often as you might think, because the camera is always the first thing people bring up about this game. In my uncommentated video that I posted, I wrote like a whole paragraph about the camera in the description. And it is true. I mean, the camera is a problem. It's probably... I said at the start that this game is undeniably flawed, and if I was giving a list of those undeniable flaws, the camera is an issue. And they tried to fix it. They give you 3 different camera view options. Like, you'll notice when gameplay starts up again, you're going to see the words normal view in the bottom left corner. That's because there are 3 different camera types you can swap between: normal view, action view, and battle view. But they mostly just seem to make the camera like more uncooperative and make it like swing around more wildly. Normal view is a fixed camera angle, basically, where it's like, here's how we think you should be looking at this room, and I almost always use that just because it means that I know for a fact that the axis of my movement, like what my movement is going to be relative to, is not going to change, and it just makes it easier to do consistent movements. And then in some environments, they just take away your control of the camera entirely, like right here. When normal view disappears, that's what that is. And I'm going through this part pretty quickly because there's going to be a boss at the top of this area, and I would like to fight him during the daytime, because the big material consequence of the day-night cycle in Castlevania 64, there are two big consequences. One is that if you take too long to beat the game, you will get a bad ending. Now, I don't really understand what the threshold is. There are lots of guides out there on the internet that will tell you that the bad ending is unlocked by using a certain number of sun or moon cards. Now, sun or moon cards will set the time to either the beginning of the daytime, 6 a.m., or the beginning of the nighttime, 6 p.m. I've done some experiments. I'm almost certain that those are not what caused the bad ending or the good ending to get triggered. I, to this day, do not know how you get the bad ending. But it seems to be if you take too long, there's an issue there. I also want to talk about this boss fight real quick before I get back to the sun card, moon card thing. This is a great example of like an absolutely atrocious camera angle. What I'm doing here, like ducking behind this wall to dip out and hit them, is absolutely the correct strategy for this fight, because otherwise you're just like jumping around like with this wonky ass camera that makes it impossible to see. But the camera angle that they chose to give you for this fight was like the most unhelpful angle possible in determining where you are compared to their attacks. So this is a situation where the camera really is a problem. As you're going to see in a moment here, I'm like a tiny speck, and I can't like tell where I am or what I'm doing. And the reason that I did a little like circuit around the little outcropping at the very start of the fight is because I want that second bone serpent, the one that's alive now, to wrap his head around the left side of that little structure, so that way he's going to be shooting fireballs at an angle that's going to always be intercepted by the wall. So sometimes he just doesn't do that. Sometimes he'll wrap his head around to the left and then like change his mind and wrap it all the way back around to the right if I'm like not fast enough or something. I don't know what the fuck causes it, but there it basically went the way that I wanted it to go. And I wanted to fight him during the daytime because during the daytime a lot of enemies are weaker. I'm pretty sure it's all of them actually. And the reason I didn't pick up all those juicy gems and all that money that dropped from that bone serpent is because there were sub-weapons mixed in there, and I didn't want those. So, and because you don't really know for sure what item you're going to pick up if you start picking up items in a big group of them on the floor, it's just safer to not pick up any of them because otherwise you're risking accidentally picking up a sub-weapon you don't want. So that's a problem, sort of baseline. And so sun cards, I think it would make sense to restrict the number of sun or moon cards you want to use, because if there's no detriment to the use of sun cards, then you could be tempted to just have them like use them all the time because they're pretty plentiful. You can get a couple of them in guaranteed drops towards the start of the game, and then once you get access to the merchant character, you can buy them from him, and his prices are pretty cheap, and gold is pretty easy to get. I'm not gonna be doing that here. I'm gonna use sun cards, I think, strategically for the final boss, and then I think that's it. I never got the bad ending. So this isn't like a thing where I'm going to show you guys both endings. I thought it was sun card, moon card usage, and then it turned out that was maybe not the case. If it's time based, I really don't just want to fucking sit there and wait for like however many in-game days it would take to unlock it. Like I don't want to bother. I'd rather just do a good, clean, single run, get the good ending. That's it. The bad ending gives you one extra boss fight, but then you don't do the last two phases of the final boss, which is, of course, a net downgrade. Fuck, I'm spilling coffee on myself. Anyway, I said this game gets better as it goes along. I think that, but the thing about the Forest of Silence, or oh, this is pretty funny. There's gonna be some voice acting here in a second. I guess I'll quiet down and let it play because it's pretty funny. This kind of has similar voice acting quality to the original dub of Symphony of the Night. Not as good, but it's a similar tone that I appreciate. I love it so much. I love it so much. Oh man. And I guess I should... Now that I think I've given basically like a baseline of like what this game is, and like what its reputation is, and what its like reception was. I guess I should talk a little bit more about my opinions of it, which are positive. Like, I like this game. I can't really... I have a hard time explaining why. There's just something about... The word that I often see invoked when people praise this game is atmosphere, and I think I would have to agree with that. The music is not... Something that I shit talk to the Igavanias, like post-Symphony of the Night Metroidvanias for, or post-Symphony of the Night Castlevania games for, is the music being sort of underwhelming. But here, the fact that the music is like ambient combined with these like it's the 3D environments, man. It's something about like the fact that it's in 3D actually kind of creates this sense of place and of being that is different from the previous games. Um, and that's crazy for me to say. It's like I think I'm getting the experience that the people who played the game when it first came out had because to me this is like a novelty, right? And obviously I don't mean I've never played 3D games before. Obviously I have, but if you think about where I'm coming to this game from, I've been playing nothing but 2D Castlevania games up to this point. So this kind of is a novelty. Like seeing these gothic hammer horror movie environments in 3 dimensions is like new. And there's a cool thing there. That pillar that came up from the fountain there only comes up at midnight. And if I really wanted to, I could have climbed on that pillar and climbed up on the top rung and gotten some items. There's some healing items. There's a sun card or the moon card. The reason I didn't do that is just because a lot of the items in this game are not really like worth going out of your way to get because the game is not super hard. The only thing about Castlevania 64 that's hard is the platforming, and there are no items that can help you with platforming. There's no hover boots. There's no there's no get out of level free items. It's just about the combat, and this is so fucking awkward. like, and here's the thing. Here's the thing. Like the fact that like the camera is so like weird and the combat is so awkward and like everything's so wonky, it doesn't piss me off. It just doesn't piss me like if I die in this game because I fuck up a jump, like it usually makes me laugh because it's just like that's pretty funny too. I was like spamming jump up the stairs. Like this game is just like I like can't I like I have a hard time really getting mad at this game. I've gotten mad at these N64 games, N64 Castlevania games before, but it's very rare. And here I'm waiting because the time span for me to activate, this is the cutscene that I was talking about way before. It's through that door, and the time span is between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Now you might be wondering, Shovatar, instead of like playing the early levels super fast, why not just use like a sun or a moon card to get to the time that you want to trigger the cutscene and then just go from there, right? Because you said there's plenty of sun and moon cards. The problem is the timing. It has to be between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. So if you use a sun card to move it to 6 a.m. and then you instantly go through the door, then the cutscene is not going to trigger. It has to be after. It has to be before 6 a.m. And then if you use a moon card to go to 6 p.m., well, now you have to wait 9 fucking hours for the cutscene to be available. So it makes much more sense to just play the first 2 levels as fast as you can and get here during that initial window. This cutscene was like really strange to encounter, and that's the other thing about this game that I think is why it's like really interesting to me is that it's very very different. Not just in the not just in the 3 dimensional department, but also the fact that like it's kind of like Aria. This whole area, this villa level, is a lot like Aria of Sorrow because you just kind of like keep on running into people to talk to. And I talked a lot of shit about Aria of Sorrow's characters being like superfluous, like there were too many of them. I'm not going to give that same criticism for Castlevania 64, even though I mean you probably could have cut some of these characters and it wouldn't have necessarily changed. Um, it wouldn't have really changed anything. I think now that I have this game to compare it to, my issue with the characters in Aria of Sorrow is more that it's less that they don't need to be there. It's more that just that they don't have anything very interesting to say. All of the characters in Aria of Sorrow basically just like cool future operative guys, and the only one who really has anything important to do or say is Julius. Like Yoko is kind of boring. I mean, she's hot, but she's boring. Genya is just boring. Graham is like, it's funny when he goes crazy, but like prior to that, it's like he doesn't really say anything. It's all just like lore dumps and just like nothing interesting being invoked. But here, like with the Rosa character, her whole arc is pretty interesting because she's gonna show up later, and I'm not gonna talk more about that until she does. But there's a word to describe video games um, that I feel like in most contexts I would use it as kind of a sarcastic pejorative, but I have used it sincerely once before, and I'm going to use it again here. The word I'm going to use is cinematic. Um, when I To describe a video game as cinematic usually kind of makes me roll my eyes because, as I've expressed before on this channel, I'm like a big gameplay guy. Like, gameplay in video games is really, really important to me, and that sounds obvious, but I feel like it's something that does need to be kind of asserted in the modern era of gaming when there is so much emphasis on like spectacle and cutscenes and like presentation over like what the game actually is. It's why every AAA video game basically looks the same, and it's all like just third person action adventure survival crafting, like it all, like whatever the fuck it is. Like, it doesn't matter. It's more about the brands associated with the games and how the games are presented and written than the gameplay itself. Um, so that's why I kind of feel like I have to say I'm not terribly charmed by that, but when it's like moderate and when it's like presented like this, um, it does kind of create a feeling like you're in another world, and it kind of like constructs this really effective, I'm going to say the word again, atmosphere. And the other reason why I don't hate the characters or I don't hate the characters in Aria of Sorrow, but the reason I'm not annoyed by the characters that show up in Castlevania 64 the way I was annoyed by the Aria of Sorrow characters is because they're funnier to talk to. Like, I love this line coming up here. My intuition tells me it is worthless. That's so funny. That's like the funniest line I've ever seen in any of these games. Um, and like, so even though like that Charlie Vincent character also basically like you could cut him and it wouldn't really make a big difference, but he's funny and I like his design and he's a cool, charming character. I love the dialogue in this game because it's so like wonky and melodramatic and weird. Like, Reinhardt has some really great lines in the other cutscenes that I neglected to point out because I was busy talking about other things. Oh, this is my favorite line in the whole game. You have entered the castle of hell. I love that. I just love imagining like the way that it's phrased is so weird, and just the situation is so goofy. Oh shit. Look at that. Look at the mirror. He's not showing up in the mirror. Oh shit. He's a vampire. They kind of give away the fact that he's a monster when he walks in and he's like stanced up like he's gonna fucking like charge at you, but this is a cool little scene. They had an idea that they wanted, and they did it. It doesn't fucking go on forever the way that cutscenes in other games tend to. So, my issue may not necessarily be with the existence of cutscenes in and of themselves. It may just more have to do with the tone of the dialogue and what the characters are saying, and how that contributes to the overall mood of the game. And I actually do think of the villa as the cutscene mansion. That's something that I've kind of called it, what like in my head when I talk about the game, because it is like where all the fucking cutscenes are. But to be fair, the villa is a pretty short level otherwise, if it wasn't for all those cutscenes. And also, um, the villa, kind of more than any other level, does a really good job of projecting that atmosphere that I'm talking about, which is interesting because it's not even in Dracula's castle. It's in the prelude. It's like this like weird empty mansion where it's not it's not like designed like a scary fucked up mansion. There's not like corpses everywhere and like blood streaming down the walls. It's very reserved, and it's sort of more the job of the music and the enemies, and especially the beginning where that vampire shows up, to sort of create that atmosphere of tension and dread and the understanding that something has gone very wrong here, even though these are opulent environments. And I read actually a excerpt of an interview with, I don't remember who he was exactly. He was some muckety muck working on this game, some higher up. Um, actually, hold off on that for a moment to talk about the merchant character. Um, I would say Castlevania 64 does a better job than Harmony of Dissonance of explaining why there's a merchant in the castle. Um, this guy's pretty. I mean, I don't really have an opinion about this, the existence of this guy either way. I think that the combat is so forgiving and the healing items are so plentiful that you could probably cut the money merchant aspect of this game entirely, and I don't think it really would make a difference. That well, actually, that being said, there are two status effects in this game. There's vampire and poison, and the items to remove those are not really as plentiful as I'd like. So I guess so. It's fine to have this in, and just as like a safety net, because there are some parts of this game that can really kick your ass. It can do a lot of damage to you. There's a part coming up actually in just a moment that's going to be like that, which I'm going to have a lot to say about. So I don't really think he's not like useless, but I'm not sure he absolutely needs to be there. And actually, if you spend enough gold at the merchant's shop, you can actually fight that guy as a boss fight. The reason I don't do that in any footage that I'm going to upload is because you have to spend 30,000 gold at the shop. And when I played through this game, the amount of gold I tended to have towards the end of like a normal run, where if I'm just picking up like every money bag that I see and I'm not like going out of my way to do anything else, I tend to end up with like 26,000 or like 24,000, like not at that amount. So it seems to me like the only way you could hit that 30,000 threshold is by like what, like fucking farming skeletons in the fucking Forest of Silence for money bags. That sounds like the least fun thing ever. So because I couldn't see a smooth, non-obstructive, non-obnoxious way to hit that 30,000 threshold, I just decided to ignore that optional boss fight. And he's not like, he has a cool design, but the way the boss fight plays is identical to another boss fight in the late game. So now we're in. I've been talking a lot of. I've been being very nice to this game. I've been saying a lot of nice things about the atmosphere and the music and the environments, and the sort of world that it constructs. But I'm going to be very very negative about this part. This is the worst part of the entire game. This part is absolutely god awful, almost unforgivable. I'll explain why it's not unforgivable. But I'm going to talk a little bit about... So this is a hedge maze, as you may have noticed. This little shit is going to start running away in a second, and then I'm going to have to chase after him. And my problem is this. Your only interaction with the hedge maze is basically this whole chase sequence. You can wander around a little bit prior to this, but what's going to happen in a moment here is a trio of indestructible enemies are going to show up. It's going to be two dogs, and then a man with a chainsaw, and they're going to chase after this kid, and then you have to try to chase them off. What the game wants you to do, I think, is chase after the kid for a bit, turn around, hit the dogs to temporarily disable them, keep running. Yeah, because they do get knocked down when you hit them, but they don't stay down. They're going to get back up and keep chasing after you. The problem is the camera, because it's really hard to turn the camera around to look behind you before the dogs are already on you, because they move fast as fuck. And the dude with the chainsaw doesn't move that fast, at least not in this game. But the issue is the dogs. They move fast as fuck, and if they bite you, they root you. So, and because it takes so long to turn the camera around, like by the time, if I wanted to like disable these things, by the time I turned the camera around, they absolutely would have caught up to me and rooted me, and maybe gotten the Frankenstein guy to come at to catch up with me too. I don't really know how fast he goes in this game. And I'll say what I mean by in this game in a minute, but the reason, so that's like terrible because number one, you're in a maze, right? So you can't see where you're going, you can't see where you are or what the fuck is going on. The camera makes it even harder to see what the fuck is going on, and you don't have time to try to get your bearings or figure out where you are or what the fuck is going on, because there's 3 indestructible enemies chasing you. So it's just a complete waste of an otherwise pretty cool environment. And it's like the worst part of the whole game. I couldn't believe it when I first got to this part. Like, I couldn't believe, like, that they put it in the game because you can't see shit. You can't see shit. You can't tell what the fuck is going on. Malice like misdirects you. He'll like run to the left, which will lead to like a dead end, and you're supposed to go to the right. Um, it's just god awful. But the reason why I say it's almost unforgivable and not patently unforgivable is because the big difference between a shitty section in a video game like the Double Frankenstein room for Portrait of Ruin, for example, and that one word: solution. There's a solution to the hedge maze chase in Castlevania 64. I just memorized the route. I memorized the route. I never stop jumping. I can do it consistently without ever taking a hit. Sometimes maybe I'll fuck up a jump. Maybe I'll stop jumping for a second and the dog will get me like once, but like it's just a matter of knowing where to go. So for someone like me who plays these games over and over again, that is so crucial because that is like the antidote to like a part of the game that sucks is just figuring out how to do it. And that's a thing that I do. I kind of have a constant concern with video games, which is the game bad or am I bad at the game? And that's kind of why I made the decision not to just play these games once, but to actually learn these games, is because it's very easy to get frustrated with a game and with a game's challenge when you first encounter it and just sort of like dismiss it, like, oh, this is bullshit, this is too hard, this is whatever. But like, it's like, is the game bad or were you just bad? You know what I mean? Um, so all of my evaluations of these games do kind of have to come with that caveat that they come from the position of someone who chooses to play these games over and over again. I'm not saying that if your opinion of a game is based off of one playthrough of it, then that opinion is invalid. I just want to make sure that I understand these games completely. So, like, if somebody plays through Castlevania 64 once, and they get to that horrible hedge maze part, and then they just quit the fucking game, like, I think that's completely understandable. And again, like, the footage is not going to convey that because I just took, like, the correct route because I just knew where to go, but if you watched my early attempts at this part of the game, you would see like what that shit was like. And I can't say that that's invalid because it's not invalid. It's a totally understandable criticism. And it's just kind of like, it's just a difference in perspective, I guess. But I don't think that like, I would say that the hedge maze is not just a matter of figuring it out. Like, I don't think that the fact that I just memorized which paths to take makes it like not bad. It's still bad. It's just not like game breakingly frustrating. It's not like a huge problem that I spend every minute prior to that point dreading. So it doesn't really bother me anymore. What a thing to say. Yeah, this is a good this boss fight is kind of tricky because yeah, you don't always really get fair warning about when he's gonna show up. The tricky part of the fight is when he like jumps up into the air and disappears, and it's hard to figure out the timing for not getting hit by him when he does this attack. Like I never quite figured out what the correct time to like, because the thing about jumping in Castlevania 64 is that it's kind of like jumping in Dracula X, where it's a net like faster movement than if you just kept running, and it happens like all at once. So jumping is like a really important movement tool. Usually the way that you would avoid an attack like that that's like chasing after you is you would jump at the correct time, but I never figured out what that timing was. And another frustrating thing that happens sometimes in Castlevania 64 combat is enemies will get staggered by your whip hits, but if they're in the middle of an animation for an attack, then they won't. And the problem is just conveyance, like understanding when they are or are not in the middle of an animation. That's kind of what happened there. And here, like, I go into battle view, which is supposed to give me like a clear indication of where the boss is at all times, but like I completely lost track of where it was because I couldn't tell like this mist thing. And this is another problem with me actually, like a personal thing, which is that my depth perception, I just have a really hard time with it. I don't have like a I don't have like a medical condition or anything. Like I've never like failed an eye exam or something like that. But I think I'm just bad at like I think my depth perception is just not good. Like I just kind of have a hard time telling how far away something is without like a really concrete reference point. So 3D games are a little bit trickier for me. It could just be habit. It could just be I'm more used to playing 2D games. Um, it's not like I never play 3D games. I used to play a lot of Team Fortress 2, but in Team Fortress 2 I would have the same problem where I just had a hard time telling like how far away things were. And the camera angle is not really very helpful. I think the camera angle in Castlevania 64 is like it's angled a little bit too close. It's like too like tilted too far up. If I was trying to figure out how far away something is, it'd be more helpful to have it the camera pointing at more of like a downward angle, so I could kind of see I could see more things, and rather instead of just like everything being on like a flat horizontal plane, and me just trying to like determine based off of like size. Now look at that! It's a hot lady taking a bath in the putrid, disgusting river. That's my kind of woman. Oh shit, she's actually an evil monster. Never mind. Oh yeah, I started talking about something that the developer said before I got sidetracked talking about the hedge maze. Um, I guess I'll just also like briefly reiterate my hedge maze stance, because I think it is important. I think it's bad, but it doesn't piss me off. Like that's kind of my final word on that. Anymore, at least. At the time I couldn't fucking believe it, but so what the developer said in the interview is that he because they were asking about like is there going to be a lot of like blood and gore in the game, and and it was like kind of and the question was not asked with a um, implication of disapproval. It was asked in the context of like the graphical capabilities of the N64. Like, oh, Castlevania has always been like this gnarly, horror franchise with all this like violence. Do you think with the N64 we're gonna see any like, any really cool, gruesome like 64-bit blood effects? And the guy said, no, 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 no. He said something about the 1999 Dracula film, or was that in '99? The one that with Gary Oldman in it, and sort of talking about going for like more of like a cinematic, but also kind of like tasteful tone. He said something about like he wanted there to be a certain beauty to it. He didn't want it to be super like gnarly and grotesque and violent. Obviously, there would still be horror elements. There would still be like scary, monstrous things in it, but he wanted it to have the thing that I keep remembering is him saying that he wanted there to be a certain beauty to it, and I that really kind of comes across in how the game is presented and how it is how it's designed, and it feels ridiculous for me to say this as I'm watching footage of like walking across like floating platforms in a sewer level, but like, oh, I guess it's not quite a sewer level, is it? It's a tunnel level. There actually is a sewer level in this game, but you play it with the other playable character. Anyway, so that's kind of really what I remember, and that's really what comes across. I was going to talk about something else, but I forgot what it was. Damn it. Because this level is not really very this level is not really very interesting overall. Oh yeah, I was going to talk about the development. This is another thing that was really important to mention about Castlevania 64, and I probably should have mentioned earlier, is as long as I'm talking about the development, this game is rushed. This game was rushed. That's kind of like that's not a rumor. That's not an extrapolation from the state of the game as it was released. That's a verified fact, is that this game is not really totally finished, um, which should, and I don't really like kind of take that into account with my evaluation. I'm just evaluating the game. I don't like, I wouldn't make any special allowances for that or anything. Because to me, if to me saying like this game was rushed, that's an explanation, not an excuse. And the distinction there is that I think saying this game is rushed as an excuse would sort of be saying this game is rushed, therefore your criticisms of it are invalid. Whereas as an explanation, it's more like this game is rushed, and that's why these things that you are criticizing exist, which is not the same thing. Um, and the game being rushed kind of comes across in a few places. It really comes across towards the very end, especially if you play. This is wild in and of itself. So this game was released in 1999. I think it was early 1999. Um, and then a second Castlevania game for the N64 called Legacy of Darkness was released later that same year. Now, Legacy of Darkness, I'm going to have a whole bunch of videos about Legacy of Darkness, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but it's basically like this is what they had to release to meet the deadline, and then they kind of went back and fixed it with Legacy of Darkness, and then they released Legacy of Darkness and said, okay, this is like what we actually wanted to make. This is kind of like how the game would look if it was finished. So you might be wondering, why am I uploading footage of Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness if Legacy of Darkness is just a better version of Castlevania 64? Well, two reasons. First of all, I actually think there are a couple of things that Castlevania 64 does better than Legacy of Darkness. It's very minor, and I do think Legacy of Darkness is a better game overall, but I do want to point that out. And second of all, just sort of because they're different games. Like, they're very similar, obviously. Like, most of the first half of the Reinhardt carry stuff is also playable in Legacy of Darkness, and it's almost identical, but they're just different games with different experiences. So it would feel like I was missing something or skipping something not to get it. And I also think that the experience of playing Legacy of Darkness really changes if you've played Castlevania 64 already. It's kind of like you're seeing the prototype, and then you're seeing like the finished product. Which is not to say that I think Castlevania 64 doesn't stand on its own as a finished product. Like I said, I really like this game. Like, I can't. It's a different kind of enjoyment. Um, and the game that I keep on thinking of when I think of Castlevania 64 is actually Super Castlevania 4, and that was a game that I was really really hard on in my criticisms of it. And a lot of my complaints about Super Castlevania 4 were based around the fact they centered the game much more aggressively around platforming, which I really really did not appreciate. So here's this game doing the same thing, and I just doesn't bother me. What's the difference? I think the difference is that this game would have to have platforming in it, or else it like would be barely a game. Like if it was just the combat is so like trivial and wonky and awkward that it needs something else to supplement that. I think the other reason is just that there's no platforming challenges in Castlevania 64 that feel inconsistent. The reason the platforming in Super Castlevania 4 pissed me off so much is because they would have these platforms that like were rendered at like this weird angle, so you couldn't really tell where the edges were, or like the fucking 8-2 disappearing platforms at the end of level 8, or like they'd like make you do platforming challenges where you have to like jump on a ledge where there's a skeleton waiting for you, and Castlevania 64 never does shit like that. There's like one or two jumps in the whole game I can think of that are kind of awkward, but most of the time it's just like you just like jump when you're supposed to, and the margin for error is never super super tight. Oh shit. This is a really funny exchange too. That feel when you'll never save your vampire GF from killing herself in a beam of sunlight in an underground warehouse, wherever the fuck this is. This is such a great exchange. I'd like to hear actually like a theologian's perspective on that assertion. If you are a vampire, if you are like an undead creature, is it still forbidden to kill yourself according to biblical edict? I'd love to hear like a fucking like cardinal say whether or not he thinks that's accurate. I mean, the Bible doesn't say anything about vampires, right? The Bible just says you're not supposed to kill yourself. Now, see, that's the key for standing up to Count Dracula. You have to be pure-hearted. You have to be just like a fucking meathead with a whip who just wants to do the right thing. That's the whole key. Ah, the castle center. This is this is a level. This is kind of the midpoint of the game. It's the longest level in the game, and most of the reason why it's so long just has to do with the fact that it makes you do a lot of backtracking. But again, and it's pretty clever with it. I think the fact that this game is rushed means that they did have to be kind of creative with what they had available, and that's what makes the Castle Center feel unique, is the fact that it's like you're really going back and forth in this interconnected environment in a way that you really don't in any of the other levels. I won't go so far as to say that it's non-linear, although it kind of is. You can do the things in different orders. And if you're familiar with the Angry Video Game Nerd episode, then this is the level with the infamous Nitro run, which you might know about even if you haven't watched that video. If you know anything about Castlevania 64, this is like the other thing that people talk about. I'm going to talk about the Nitro run when we get to it, because it's not going to be for a little bit. I actually do the Nitro run at the very end. And that's just because it's just the most convenient way to traverse the castle. This is a cool little cutscene. This is completely optional. If you never walk up to this statue, you can just totally skip this, but I like it, so I decided to do it. Why is he die? Oh, he dies in one hit because okay, he dies in one hit because it's daytime, right? I forgot about that. Ah, excuse me. Sprawling is what I think of with the Castle Center, and it does get a little bit. It's got a little bit old. I will admit that this room is a little bit. This room's kind of weird because you have to kill these lizard guys. There's like going to be 4 or 6 lizard guys who come out of these little containment pods, and you can't leave the room until they're all dead. But what's what's weird about it is that there's no visual indicator that this is the case. Like I remember at one point going through this room and like getting to the door leading out of the room, and it like wouldn't open, and I'm thinking to myself, what is happening here? And what it is that what I just said. You have to kill them before the door opens, which is very strange. I mean, maybe it's not strange. Maybe that's just like a property of... No way. These guys... I feel like these guys poison you, but that guy just hit me with like his poison spit attack, and I'm not poisoned, so... Maybe only some of them do and some of them don't. I don't really recall. I like this music. I like this little backbeat. The main theme of the game, I believe, is how it's described. And this is a good place to play the main theme of the game, because you're going to be here longer than you're going to be in any other level in the game. Like, I think I'm going to be here for, what's the timestamp? We're at almost 55 minutes. I came in at, like, 50 minutes. Oh yeah, these things, so normally if a vampire catches you in that grab attack, you get the vampire debuff. I didn't even explain what it did. The vampire debuff makes it so you can't use your whip. You can only use your like sword, your short-range sword, which, hey, I brought up in the past, Belmonts always have swords. Why don't they use it? Reinhardt actually has one, although I very rarely utilize it. I feel I don't even really know how you deliberately utilize it. It seems like excuse me. It's like sometimes if you just hit B enough times, then there's a little short range sword slash. I don't know. But if you get vampirized, the sword is your only means of attack. Um, and the way you cure is with the purifying crystals. Normally, if they get you in that grab attack, they'll vampirize you. But if you move the control stick enough, you can break out. Which I don't like that at all. I don't like any mechanics in games that. Oh, this is so cool. I love this. I remember being totally confused when I first got here because I'm like, am I supposed to fight this dude or what? But no, you're supposed to talk to him. Because if you try to fight him, he just like runs away from you, and I didn't get what was going on. Yes, Magical Nitro and Mandragora. There are two walls you have to destroy. There's one wall up here, and then the second wall on the bottom floor. But in order to destroy the second wall, you have to release a magical seal, which is accessible. And the way you do that is by doing a puzzle through the first wall. So the centerpiece of this whole level is moving the Mandragora and Magical Nitro to the different places, and you'll see why moving the Nitro is like trickier than moving the Mandragora in just a moment, presumably. This is also like a really weird exchange. Well, it doesn't get funny till the end, in my opinion. Creepy little kids. This is such a like. I actually really don't like the like creepy little kid horror trope. I think it's basically been played out since The Exorcist in fucking 1979. Was that 79 or was that 77? I don't remember what year The Exorcist came out, but I hate creepy little kids in horror movies and like in horror shows. It's like it's so annoying to me. But it's okay here because this game's like not really scary. It's just trying to like create a atmosphere of scary-esqueness. So the reason I love the end of this exchange, it's not till here. The fuck is this kid's problem? He's been watching too much television, probably. I love that last line from Reinhardt because that line, I feel like that's what you would say if you were like babysitting a kid in real life and he said something like that. Like you're like babysitting, like you're looking after, I don't know, like your fucking nephew or something who's like way younger than you, and he says to you at some point, all living creatures must consecrate their souls to the Dark Lord. I feel like you'd say that's like what you'd say in real life. You'd say like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean by that? So, and the reason that's funny to me is because this is not real life. This is like a fantasy setting where presumably shit like, I don't know, like demonic possession and like evil magic exists. So I feel like Reinhardt's reaction is completely, it's a severe underreaction given the setting and given the context, but it's funny because it's like, that's exactly what you would say to a kid in real life, I feel like, if they said something like that to you. So that's why these interactions, these little like cutscenes don't bother me, is because almost every cutscene has something in it that I think is like funny or interesting or noteworthy. Which is especially funny because I feel like the amount of thought put into the dialogue in this game probably much lower than the amount of thought put into the dialogue for like Aria of Sorrow. Obviously I can't know that for sure because these are both translations, of course. But it's like, I don't know. I'm a big fan of like, or I'm not bothered by cheesiness. You know what I mean? Like I feel like the whole concept is like not super serious. You're fighting like Dracula. Dracula's like a movie monster, right? So it's like who cares if it's a little bit goofy? And if they're just like throwing like Western horror tropes all over the place to see what works. I guess I should also talk a little bit about the emulation itself, because I guess if you guys are N64 purists, you might have noticed something. And I should have probably talked about this earlier. So when I first played Castlevania 64, I didn't like. I wasn't really thinking about any kind of graphical settings. I just like played it and then I full screened it and then I recorded it, and like that's how I recorded my first Reinhardt run. But then afterwards, I was like looking around in the settings, and it was like, oh, oh, wait a minute. I just recorded an entire run, like full screen, in like 640 by 480 resolution, stretched to a 1920 on 1080 monitor. I was like, oh, I should like, and there's this thing here in the graphics settings that says upscaling. I was like, oh, I should probably like, I should probably play this game in a resolution that actually matches my computer. And then when I did that, I was like, oh, now I can actually like see what's going on. Now I can actually like see things that I couldn't see before. So, this is upscaled. This is triple upscaled. So I think that was the closest multiple of 480 that I think I could fit into. No, that doesn't make sense. Whatever. It's upscaled. That's the bottom line. So that way it's on a 1080p screen and it looks 1080p and you can watch it in 1080p. Nothing to be done about the frame rate, unfortunately. Or maybe it's not unfortunate. Maybe the lower frame rate helps make it seem more like a cinematic experience that I was just gushing about. Yeah, the Castle Center music struck me as a little bit odd at first. Something about like the like jungle drums doesn't seem like it fits with a gothic castle, but whatever. It grew on me. A majestic beast felled in the middle of a vast, completely empty coliseum. That's another thing that's interesting about Castlevania 64 is the fact that it's so sparsely populated. Like in previous Castlevania games, Dracula's castle is very much like a hub of activity. There's always like something going on. There's like monsters everywhere. There's like skeletons fucking running around. It's like, and that's just because those are like level-based action games. But the fact that with Castlevania 64, the emphasis is more on I don't know if I'd say puzzle solving necessarily. But like with the Castle Center especially, it just seems like it's more like just about kind of exploring the environments. I think I once referred to Symphony of the Night as an explore 'em up. And I would say this game is more like that, at least with this level. And that is another thing about the game that I would praise it for, is the fact that like the Castle Center is such an interesting level. Yes, it does have elements of it that are frustrating, but it's completely different from basically all the levels that come. Definitely different from all the levels that come after it. And like it's like the villa is the same way. It's like you go from the Forest of Silence, which is kind of like, I mean, it's a big outdoor open area, but is essentially linear. Like there's one way you're supposed to go through all of it, one order where you have to hit all of the switches. Then to the castle wall, which is like very linear, and then you get to the villa, which is more kind of open-ended and sprawling, and like you can really kind of spend a lot of time fucking around in the villa if you want to. There's actually a door that I never went into, a storeroom, which has some meat in it, I think. And that's why I didn't go into it, because the only thing that it has is something I don't need, which is more healing items. I'm good on healing items. I'm never going to die to the combat in Castlevania 64. At least, not on normal mode, which I'll talk about later, because there is actually one combat situation I can think of in Castlevania 64 where you are liable to die, but it's not going to be relevant here. And then you go from that to the tunnels, which are also kind of like the Forest of Silence, where like there's lots of different areas you can go to, but there is basically one correct path through the level. A lot of the stuff in the tunnels actually goes unused. Like there's several different platforming sections that I just totally ignore because like they looked like hell on Earth. And just like there's no reason to take like risks like that. There's no reason to do like a whole extensive weird wonky platforming section unless you have to. And then you get to the Castle Center, which is like the centerpiece of the game, and it has a totally like a unique feel to it. So it's like the game is interested in keeping things varied, and maybe that's another reason why it never got boring for me, even though the combat is not super like is not super interesting, and I don't usually like platforming, but I don't know. I have such a hard time explaining rationally why I like this game. The combat was satisfactory to the point that I felt like I had a chance to figure out the learning curve of it a little bit, because the key to the combat in Castlevania 64 is that there's like a back hop and like side hops, and that's kind of how you're supposed to move during combat, is with those quick little movements. And then you're not really supposed to do like the big running leaps unless you're in the platforming sections. But it's tricky to do that because the way that you execute the back hops or the dodges is by like tapping the control stick over to the left or right or behind you and then hitting the A button. And the issue again, it's the camera, because the camera is constantly changing where you are going to go if you hit back or to the side or to the left or to the right with the control stick. Like, there are very few, and the reason, like, there, especially if it's combat against a really mobile enemy, because even if you hit battle view, which is what I did there, the fact the enemy is constantly moving means that the fact that the battle view is trying to keep the camera centered on the enemy you're fighting the whole time means that it's going to be constantly moving. And against mobile enemies, like, that's when you want to be dodging around the most, because those tend to be the most dangerous ones. Like the werewolf in the forest, or like those vampire guys. They're not super dangerous, but like, you definitely don't want to get vampirized if you can avoid it, because there's only so many purification crystals that you're going to naturally encounter. And you definitely don't want to be vampirized, because I think if you're vampirized for too long, you actually die, which is pretty weird. I didn't even talk about what poison does. Poison in this game, I think it just does ticking damage. I don't think it affects your damage, the amount of damage you do or the amount of damage you take, although I'm not 100% sure about that. I would have to do like more controlled experiments, but I never really noticed a significant... Well, the thing is that I was just never really poisoned for that long, because I was always very careful about making sure that I loaded up on poison antidotes. Mm. No, that's not really a code. That's just kind of objective advice. Actually, what that is that's a clue for the puzzle that's coming up here, which, full disclosure, I didn't figure out the puzzle on my own. I looked it up, but I kind of in my defense, I looked it up by accident, because I was looking up something about the placement of the magical nitro on the wall, because the way the game talks about the magical nitro and the mandragora is kind of misleading. And I think this is what tripped up the angry video game nerd in his video. I think, or I'm pretty sure this is what happened, because what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to place the magical nitro and the mandragora next to each other in front of the wall. Now, to be fair, if I was massive brained, I could have guessed that just from the fact that the last number is 8, that the previous two could be 2 and 4, because you're thinking about like a sequence. It's like, 2, 4, 8, or maybe like what, 4, 6, 8, or but if anyway. But that's not what I did. I accidentally looked it up, because I was confused about the magical nitro mandragora thing, because the way that the game phrases it makes it sound like you're supposed to put the magical nitro down, then walk up to the magical nitro and use the mandragora on the magical nitro, because all the descriptions of it talk about it like you're applying the mandragora as the detonator to the nitro. But that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to walk up to the wall and just place them both next to each other. And I didn't get that at first, so I was like, okay, I've hit the same problem the angry video game nerd did. I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do with this mandragora. I put the nitro down, but I'm standing right in front of the nitro, and I'm hitting the interact button, and nothing's happening. What's going on? And then I looked it up, and I learned that. And in the process of looking it up, I looked up an old like Game FAQs guide, and they had like a big list of like FAQs at the front of the guide, and the first one was, "What's the angel puzzle?" And it's like 248, and I was like, "Oh, well, okay." Now I know that. Now that information is in my fucking head and I can't get it out, so I don't have any chance to figure out this puzzle myself. So, oh well. I like the fact that the music cuts out when you first get to the spot. It adds, once again, a little extra touch to the atmosphere. I'm trying not to say the word atmosphere over and over again. I'm also not going to say the word soul if I can avoid it. I just did, but I think that not saying it is unavoidable, so I'm going to say it at least once, and that was the at least one time that I'm going to say it. So there. This game has it in spades. I think there's just something about this era of early 3D that I find really charming. Some of my favorite games tend to come from this like late 90s era, like System Shock 2 is like my favorite game of all time, maybe. I really like Half-Life 1. Like I don't mind the fact that it looks like this. You know what I mean? And what's crazy is that this is and before anybody makes this assumption about me, this is not nostalgia talking. I've said this before. I'm basically a zoomer. I'm a crypto zoomer. I grew up with the GameCube and like the GBA, a little bit of Game Boy Color, but mostly like GameCube, GBA, a little bit of PS2, and then like Wii, and then I kind of like stopped console gaming. But mostly I grew up on the GameCube. So this is not like N64 nostalgia talking. I didn't grow up with these games. I grew up with games one generation after this. And actually, another fun fact is that I'm playing this on emulator, but I am playing this with a USB N64 controller because I wanted the authentic experience, and it was an interesting thing to experience because I had literally never held an N64 controller until I started playing this game. I might have held one like briefly. I think my cousin had an N64. Maybe I played like something for a little bit, but I really don't think so. I think this was the first time I ever actually held an N64 controller in my hand and played a game with it. And for the longest time I had thought of the N64 controller as just like this bizarre, incomprehensible controller design, because it's like, why are there three handles? What is this for three-handed people? Like, what is going on here? And it's not until... And if anybody else watching this has ever been confused about the three-prong N64 handle, I think not. I think most of the people who watch this game, who watch my videos, are actually, like, kind of around my age or maybe older. But just in case you're, like, confused about the N64 controller, the concept behind the N64 controller, it's the kind of thing that really only makes sense if you think about it in the context of that era when 3D games were super new and people didn't really even necessarily know how you would handle navigating in a 3D environment. Like, the DualShock design seems so obvious in retrospect, but even the PS1, I didn't know this. The PS1 initially released with a controller that had no analog sticks. It was just a D-pad, which is why you have fucking tank controls for really early PS1 games. Anyway, the concept behind the N64 controller is that if you are playing a 2D game, you got your left hand on the left handle. I should explain actually what I just did there. So the reason I dipped down to kill those vampires is because I'm about to do the Nitro run, which involves carrying a magical Nitro a really long way where you can't jump or take damage the whole time or you instantly die. And I was under the impression, excuse me, at the time that I was recording this footage, that if I didn't clear those vampires out ahead of time, they would respawn and I would have to try to avoid them while I was doing the Nitro run. But actually, if you the game like can detect if you're doing the Nitro run or not, and it doesn't spawn them in that room if you're carrying magical Nitro. It doesn't make you fuck with them. You do still have to fuck with the two motorcycle skeletons afterwards, but you don't have to deal with the three vampires because that would be like borderline impossible, I think. And it would just be so hard. Yeah, the way you're supposed to solve that puzzle with the angel statues is to inspect the three statues and then remember the three numbers. Not what I did, but that's the idea. I actually don't even know where the first angel statue is, although if you just had 4 and 8, you could probably guess that the first number is supposed to be 2. Anyway, N64 controller. If you're playing a 2D game, you have your left hand on the left handle with the D-pad, and then your right hand on the right handle where all the buttons are, and then if you're playing a 3D game, you got your left hand on the middle handle where the analog stick is, and then your right hand where it is before on the buttons. So it was their way of solving the problem of how do we create a controller where the player can play 3D games and 2D games on the same controller. Like, I think that was the question. Again, DualShock seems so common sense, but at the time it was not. And yes, the consequence is that sometimes if you're playing 3D games, like your hand's a little bit cramped. But I'm fortunate in that I have tiny hands, just like the Japanese consumers that the N64 was intended for. So I don't usually experience any discomfort when I play N64 games, even though I'm totally unused to the controller. So the controller, I was worried about the controller being an issue. Turned out it wasn't, and it was a fun, a little educational experience anyway. Because it's important to me to play these games as close to the originals I can. And if I was super dedicated, I would have done the same thing with all those NES and SNES games and like played with a fucking USB SNES controller. Whatever, man. It's different for 3D games. For 3D games, I need an analog stick. I can't just play on a keyboard, so that's why. And I think we're coming up to the first break here. Yes, this is a good place for a break. Yeah, as I said in the description of the uncommentated footage, this was done in two parts. I don't usually like using save states, but I will make exceptions if I sort of judge that the balance of fun to satisfaction would sort of weigh too much against fun, basically, which is code for I don't want to put like an hour and a half of my time behind whether or not I make some like wonky jump in this goofy ass game. Anyway, the reason I chose this part of the game for my single save state was because it's basically the worst part of the game. I would say on par with the hedge maze. If you guys aren't familiar with the Nitro run, I have said multiple times already that I really like this game, and I'm not kidding about that. But I can't let my affection. I'm going to try to be even-handed both ways. If something is good, I'm going to say why it's good. If it's bad, I'm going to admit that it's bad. This is real bad. This concept is kind of fundamentally flawed from the ground up. Like, there's no way to implement this idea that I think would be fun. If you guys didn't see it in the brief little text windows that popped up, the idea is that while you carry the magical nitro, you can't jump, you can't slide, you can't fall off of anything, and you can't take any damage. If you do any of those things, you instantly die. And when I say fall off of things, I mean like if your feet leave the ground completely and then hit the ground again, even if you're falling off of like a half-inch elevation at the very tail end of a ramp, you are dead. And something that I've talked about before in a lot of other Castlevania games is kind of the nature of movement in video games. And movement in video games is like really important. It's arguably the most important thing in a video game because it's the thing that you're going to be doing more than anything else, more than any combat in games like this. I mean, more than any combat, more than any like interaction with the world or with the storyline or with the characters, you're going to be moving. So movement has to be at baseline acceptable and at best really fun. Like that's why I like Harmony of Dissonance so much, because Juiced has so many movement options just from the very start of the game, and that's why I like going fast in video games is always fun. That's why I like Rapidus Fio in Order of Ecclesia, because you have all of these advanced movement options. Juiced in Harmony of Dissonance is really the better example. The Maxime too, for Maxime mode. That's one end of the movement quality spectrum. On the other end, the corollary is that not having access to advanced movement, not being able to move, not being able to navigate the environment in the best way possible is not fun. It's the opposite of fun. So in a game where they give you these tools of jumping and sliding to navigate the game, being told now that you can no longer do that is kind of a terrible idea. And there's more to the Nitro run, like the specifics of it, which I think I'll get into in a different video because I have several different runs of this game, and I'm going to talk about the specifics of what's going on more in those videos. But I just want to talk about like the idea of the Nitro run. And unlike the hedge maze, it's a part of the game that doesn't get any better with prior knowledge. The excuse that I gave for the hedge maze being the way that it is that once you figure it out, it's not that bad. With the Nitro run, excuse me, the things that make it difficult are basically totally out of your control. So, I mean, there is a learning curve to it, like there is with anything else. Obviously, if you do it more times, you do get better at it because it's really only one or two parts that are particularly tricky, and they made it worse in hard mode, and they made it way fucking worse in Legacy of Darkness, which I couldn't fucking believe. But that's a story for another time, as they say. Who says that? Maz Kanata says that in The Force Awakens. Oh boy, don't get me started on the Star Wars sequels. Anyway, the Castle Center is... So the Castle Center is pretty cool overall, I think, but the Nitro run really makes it pretty bad. And I think the level... You know what the Castle Center is kind of like? It's kind of like the Barrens from World of Warcraft. Because the Barrens in World of Warcraft is a big-ass zone where you could spend like 15 levels in there, and it's huge, and most of it looks kind of the same, and you're there forever. But like all of those facts about it, all those qualities of it are kind of what make it distinct and what make it beloved. Like ask anybody who played World of Warcraft back in like, the classic, like the vanilla era, and they will, if they played Horde, they'll probably have fond memories of the Barrens. I know I do. And the Castle Center's kind of like that, because it's long and it's big, and the whole thing is gray and brown. Oh. It's time for this boss fight. So this boss fight's actually pretty interesting. It's one of the few boss fights in the game that I would say carries the real potential to be dangerous. Excuse me for one moment. Sorry, had to blow my nose. Still a little bit sick. Anyway, yes, the real potential to be dangerous. If this guy hits you with any of his attacks, they do a lot of damage, and especially his charge attack, which is kind of the centerpiece of the fight, is he'll do one laser attack, then he'll charge, then he'll do a different laser attack, then he'll charge, then he'll go back to the first laser attack, and that's kind of the pattern of the fight. And the key is just to kind of always stay moving and always be trying to get behind him no matter what. Another key thing with the charge attack is that once you see him do that like downward head animation, if you haven't jumped by the time he does that, you're gonna get hit. So you kind of have to jump like preemptively. There's not really a specific telegraphed like animation that he does that you should jump to avoid. It's more like when he kind of starts turning towards you, that's when you need to jump. And as you can see, that was pretty close there. So that should say something about the margin with which you have to start jumping. Another thing this boss is interesting. It's definitely more exciting than a lot of the bosses prior to this. My issues with it mostly have to do with the health bar, actually, because I think the fight probably goes on for too long. But even if I could like forgive that by saying, it's a behemoth, it's a big monster, whatever. The issue is that the health bar is not really indicative of its health. Like, I don't really know how this thing works. I don't know how it decides when it's dead, because it's not about the health bar. It's like, you'll notice how like one section of it is skeletized right now. Oh no, the head is going to be skeletized too. Skeletized? Skeletonized? Whatever. Point is, if you destroy like the center of his body, that seems to be like what kills him, but all three sections of him seem like they have their own like health bars, and it's not like you have to destroy all three sections. Like, I don't think the head, like, you can't, like, the head doesn't have to be destroyed. I think it's the body. And like, when he dies, that he's gonna have, the health bar is gonna show that he has like 25% health left, like the moment he dies, which is not correct. So I don't get what the health bar is supposed to, how it's supposed to relate to how close he actually is to being dead or not. And that's not the worst thing in the world. Plenty of later Castlevania games basically got rid of the whole health bar thing entirely. So it's not like, I actually prefer it when bosses have health bars. I prefer having that information. But if I don't, it's not like it's not a deal breaker exactly, but it's weird to have a health bar and then have the health bar not accurately correspond to the boss's health. That's kind of the worst option, I think. Oh yeah, and if you hit him and you stand too close to him, you get poisoned. I'm actually kind of pushing it by being that close to him. Yeah, you could see he was at like 20% health, and then he lost it all in one big thing. So that's pretty strange. Skeletons on motorcycles. Did I mention that this game takes place in 1852? I haven't looked up when the motorcycle was invented. I'm confident it's, excuse me, after that, although I guess I don't know for sure. I think that might be one of those things where, like, maybe if, like, some super early prototype motorcycle was invented... Well, wait, what even... Fuck it. Never mind. That's pretty much all he's been saying this whole time, lady. Oh no. It's the Grim Reaper. I think this is the only game where he shows up with those raven wings. I don't remember seeing that in any of his other incarnations. I think in all the other incarnations of the Grim Reaper, the game just kind of accepts that the player will understand that he can fly, but here they gave him wings, which is fine. So this fight is, like, really weird. I actually don't get this fight at all, because she does, like, a lot of attacks. She does 3 different attacks. She'll do, like, a halo attack, that one, and then she'll do, like, a fire, like, flower attack, and then she dashes at you and tries to hit you with her sword. And the sword attack I understand. I don't really understand either of her other 2 attacks. Like, as you can see there, I can kind of jump over the halo attack, but I don't get what I'm supposed to do to dodge her fire attack. I feel like I've tried everything. I've tried, like, sliding towards her, sliding away from her, sliding to the side. Like I can't figure out what I'm supposed to do there. And here, I don't think I can... this is definitely not the camera angle I want. I don't think this is something I have any control over. Okay, she died. Yeah, that boss is pretty frustrating because I never quite figured her out. And the vampire lady with the sword now reminds me of Stella from Portrait of Ruin, another boss fight, by the way, that I never really figured out and was never really very good at. But what I don't get is, like, the fight ends up basically playing like kind of a DPS race where, like, you just try to kill her before she kills you, which is not my favorite kind of fight. Excuse me. I always forget there's a save crystal over there. I don't think I've ever used that. A little two-dimensional scythe. Oh no. Yeah, adding the wings when they clip through that little, like, thing around his shoulders, I don't know. Maybe they felt like he looked weird without them, and, like, his ability to fly was not properly conveyed. So I don't really. I think the sentiment of that fight was her trying to force him to kill her, but I don't know why the Grim Reaper was there except to establish that he's there, so that way at the end of the fight he can teleport her away. Whatever. None of that shit matters. So now we're in the last stretch of the game. There are 3 more levels before Dracula. There's the Duel Tower, there's the Tower of Execution, and then there's the Clock Tower. The Duel Tower and the Tower of Execution are both Reinhardt only levels. And I have a real problem with the Duel Tower. My problem with the Duel Tower is what it is the name of it. Because every other tower level in the game, I guess with the exception of the Clock Tower, is called the Tower of something, like the Tower of Sorcery or the Tower of Science are the 2 carry levels. And then you have the Tower of Execution, but then you have the Duel Tower. It should be like the Tower of Combat or something, because, as the title suggests, really the centerpiece of this level are all these 1v1 fights that you have with animal people in the cages. And this is kind of like... this is when a big problem with the camera becomes really apparent, what I talked about before. Fighting enemies that are fast, that kind of, like, get out of your way really quickly. There it wasn't that bad, because he kind of cornered himself, but But that could have been a lot worse, and that camera was just kind of at a fortuitous angle. And I think I've said before that like the changing the camera from normal to like action or combat doesn't really seem to do much. The difference is much more apparent in Legacy of Darkness, but now I'm talking about Legacy of Darkness. It's especially frustrating because like those monsters aren't really liable to kill you, but there's a time limit. If you don't kill them fast enough, the ceiling comes down and crushes you. Oh no, it's a dog man. Yeah, this guy's kind of the perfect example of the issues with the combat, where like the way you fight that thing is basically like he tries to attack you, you sidestep and then whip, and then you really don't have time to whip again, because kind of like by the time you finish the first whip and start on the second one, he'll already start be like zooming around looking for the next attack, and he's just way too fast. The problem isn't necessarily that his attacks are too fast, that he's too fast to be hit. The problem is that he's too fast to be seen. Or like he has a bad habit of like zooming out of your camera view. There it's not really that didn't really happen there just because the area is so small. So here's actually there's two pathways through this level, and I take this one even though it involves kind of this awkward like trust fall onto the platform, because the other one has a really tricky, really tight jump. That's just insanely inconsistent. So I'm very, very grateful for to the developers rather for adding this alternate path, because here you have to make more jumps, but they're all pretty reliable and consistent. The awkward jump in the dual tower that I'm avoiding by doing this is like you have to basically do a running jump onto a small platform, then do another running jump off like the very, very, very edge of it to get to the next part, which is my least favorite thing in any of these Castlevania games, 2D or 3D. It's kind of like one of the big problems with Castlevania Chronicles is that it has a jump like that right at the fucking very end. The dual tower is kind of a flawed concept at the base, for this game at least, because yeah, that's really kind of shitty too, but again, there's very little you can do to make that not happen. Hmm. Actually, I do think that if you use the control pad, I don't remember if this was implemented in this game or Legacy of Darkness, but if you use the control pad, I think you can manually like swing the camera around, but I don't know if I necessarily knew that at this point in time. So this is actually a fight where the time limit is a real factor, because it's like hard to... Yeah, the idea is you jump to get distance on him, then whip, then immediately jump away again to reestablish distance, but the problem is like when you turn around and whip him, like sometimes you'll hit him and sometimes you won't, because sometimes the game just like won't understand that you're trying to whip the only other thing in the cage match room with you, so it's a little strange. That was fucking close. Dude, fucking hand sweat city. I'm glad that I bought two of these USB N64 controllers, because the one that I used to play this game is fucking soaked in sweat. It's fucking gross. My hands sweat so much when I play this game, because I'm like, I think I mentioned in previous commentaries, I'm afraid of heights. In real life, I mean. Like, I have a real problem with it. And these games, it doesn't make the games like unplayable necessarily, but it does add like an extra level of stress to all that like high up platforming stuff. So the Tower of Execution is probably the hardest level for Reinhardt, for reasons that should be clear based on what I've already said about the game. This is basically like a fucking Mario 64 level, where you just have to do a lot of platforming on like tricky ledges and tricky like platforms while dealing with enemies coming at you. It doesn't ever really get like totally degenerate the way that certain platforming challenges in like Dracula's Curse get, for example. There's nothing on the same level as like the A2 bats coming at you while the pendulums are swinging. That's like always what I think of when I think of like the absolute worst, like most demanding platforming challenges. As I think of that part of Dracula's Curse, and that's another fucking thing that happens right at the end. This was kind of risky, but the reason that I did it is because the way the I don't quite understand what governs the spawns of the Medusa heads. So the Medusa head, you'll notice like one Medusa head spawned back there, and then I killed it, and then like another one spawned. But like sometimes Medusa heads also spawn between those platforms that come in and out of the wall like that. But it's like sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not there. And I had just kind of learned that if the platforms were in that position that they were in when they got there, Medusa heads tended to not spawn. So I knew that if I took that sequence of platforms in that way, that I'd be able to get across without a Medusa head spawning. But I honestly don't know why. I don't know why they do or they don't show up. But I just knew that it wouldn't in that particular case. Because that is actually the one thing about. There are a couple instances of like you're trying to do platforming challenges, but there are fucking Medusa heads spawning in front of you. But it's like they're not always there. And the fact that you're playing in 3D means that like you can always just fucking go around them if you really want to. And the Tower of Execution is actually going to be extra hard for me here because there's a whole other section of the level behind that lock back there that I want to get to, because that's how you get the alternate costume for Reinhardt, which is what I'm going to be wearing in my hard mode run. This is pretty scary, but this is kind of the only way that I have to deal with this part. That was not what I meant to do. I am absolutely certain I did not want to slide there. Okay, there we go. Fun fact about these turrets. Every turret that's upside down, that's hanging from a ceiling, will die in one hit to basically everything. Which is very, very nice, because those are usually the ones that are in like the most like awful positions. Like during the tunnel level when you're on like the floating like thing on the rail. Shovatar, it's not floating if it's on a rail and it's attached to the rail by another part of its body. That is not floating. You know what I mean? Yeah, this is another part where Medusa heads sometimes spawn, but I don't know why. Let's see if one does here. No, not this time. Okay. Yeah, this is probably the hardest part of the whole level. This part here where you have to like, you just have a very specific window to get onto this third platform before the blade swings back. Okay, there's the Medusa head, but sometimes they spawn. Sometimes one of them spawns earlier than that. Basically, if the Medusa head doesn't spawn in that platforming sequence, then you're okay, and if it does, then it can get pretty scary. In neither case is it really like... The thing about Castlevania 64 is that none of the challenges it puts before you are that complicated, like on paper, like mechanics-wise. The solution is always very simple. The issue is just the execution. And here, I can't... or like I couldn't figure out how to get the camera to show me the platform down there. So I think I am going to have to do a little bit of a leap of faith here, or like try to infer where the platform is based on... Okay, there we go. Never mind. I don't know how I got it to do that. There have been times that I've been like... I just run back and forth impotently across that little ledge there, and I just never see what I want to see. Yeah, this is me backtracking to go get the alternate costume, which, like I said, makes the level a lot harder, because you basically have to do the hardest parts of it twice. I think this was the place where I had my one death, because like I said at the start, I did make a save state for the castle center, and I did like make a policy that if I died after that, I would reload from that save state. But I actually only reloaded once, and it was to a death here in the Tower Execution. I don't remember where though. Special 2. You know, it's called the Tower of Execution, but none of what I'm seeing here seems like it would actually be very convenient for executions. Do you know what I mean? I feel like an execution room, you just have like one guillotine, right? Or like a gallows or something. But here, imagine if you wanted to take a prisoner here to execute them. You'd have to like, I mean, if you just want to dump them into the lava, then it's okay. But otherwise, you'd have to haul them all the way up onto the bridges and then like put them under the swinging blades and try not to get hit by them yourself and then make sure that the blades like it just seems like a big fat pain in the ass. So Dracula really was not thinking straight when he designed this one, I have to say. The dual tower makes much more sense from a conceptual standpoint. Ah, yes, the red skeletons. My best friends. There's a couple of red skeletons with some. Okay, yeah. See, there it is. Now, why did it do that? And there was a second one. I didn't even know that was there. I was just whipping like because I thought it might have been there. I don't know why. See, why were they spawning there when they weren't spawning there before? And why did that one spawn and then instantly disappear? And where did that one come from? I don't get it at all. This part is that part is actually so scary where you have to pull yourself up on the ledge. You just kind of have to do it super fast because otherwise you can get stuck in this loop of like the guy throws a bone and hits you and knocks you off of the ledge, and then by the time you get up and you're hanging off the ledge again, he throws another bone at you that hits you and then knocks you off the ledge, and then you have to like stand back up and try to do the jump again, and it's like really, really awful. The best way that I discovered to do it is just try to do it all super fast. If I had more control over the camera, I probably would have tried to look up at him and throw like a cross at him or something, but I don't know if that's even possible. And that's the Tower of Execution. Man, that was so short. Legacy of Darkness elaborated on a lot of these late game levels. You know what's absolutely shocking about this area right here is that this is called the Room of Clocks, and there's going to be a boss fight coming up pretty shortly here. So you're in this room before a boss fight, and the room is full of like torches and candles that you can whip for things. What always shocked me about this room is how absolutely useless the drops from the candles are. Like, there's no crosses, there's no big jewels either, I don't think. Not that you need them for this. This is the death fight, and this is... yeah, that's how I feel sometimes when I fight against death in these games. Yeah. Wretched cur. I love these translations. I love like when localizers take like Japanese insults and try to translate them into like archaic archaic English speech. Knave, that's a good one. That's kind of a weird line, but I know what he means. Because it's not like... to say, have you forgotten your blood would make it sound like, that's kind of implies, like, have you forgotten your family? But she's not, like, family to anybody. She's just a vampire, the way that Dracula, and so she's supposed to be on the evil side. I will kill the Count! The three exclamation marks are not really, like, They kind of undermine the drama of the scene because it makes it seem like he's yelling at her, which is not necessarily not really warranted under the circumstances. I actually like this scene. I like this little bit here. She dies just like that lady in The Dark Knight Rises does. Damn, rest in peace. So this is the death fight. Yeah, the dialogue in this scene is all like really good. And when I say good, I mean it's good in the sense that like in like the dialogue in these games, the way that that's good, where it's like this kind of like campy, like fun, dramatic kind of talk. That's what I really like in these games. That's why I like the Symphony of the Night localization, the Symphony of the Night dub the way everybody else does. Anyway, so Grim Reaper, yeah. Definitely one of the easier Grim Reaper fights, which, if you're designing this game, you kind of don't have a choice but to do that, because the Grim Reaper, like, you don't really want to make a boss fight that's too hard in any of these N64 Castlevania games, because, especially this one, because the wonky imprecision of the controls and, like, the goofy-ass camera means this is really fucking weird, by the way. The fact that he summons giant demon fish and throws them at you. It's weird, but I like it. It's cool. It's different. I don't think he ever does that again. And I have no idea why they decided to do that. Maybe it's some weird Japanese cultural thing. Or maybe that happens in some horror movie. Yeah, you really don't want to make a boss fight that's too hard. There, I was expecting him to, like, slash in the air like he did before, but sometimes he just throws it at you from up there. And again, like, the hardest, and, like, okay, that line, Belmont, was there a particular reason why his name isn't just Reinhardt Belmont? If he's supposed to be... Because the opening title crawl says he's a, I like this dialogue, too. Although I don't know how death goes to hell. It doesn't make much sense to me. Was there, like, a reason why they couldn't name him Belmont? Was this, like, a weird, like, Konami internal division thing? Because I think, think I said at the start of the commentary, this was KCAC, this is Konami Computer Entertainment Kobe, instead of, I think the Tokyo division was what did most of the other games. Did I get up to... I think I got up to... Okay, no, there we go. Yeah, I think I got up to use the bathroom during that cutscene. It's pretty funny. So is this like a weird thing where it's like, yes, we'll let you make a Castlevania game, but like you can't say Belmont? I don't get it. Because they did I think have this idea in the larger Castlevania timeline, where like the Belmonts were supposed to disappear during the 1800s. So maybe they didn't want to like, but I don't think any games had established that at this point. Maybe it had something to do with because there was a game that was never made called Castlevania Resurrection. It was going to be for the Dreamcast. I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I think it was supposed to come out, well, Dreamcast. I guess it must have been early 2000s. So maybe it had something to do with like the parallel development of that game. Like they didn't want. But this game takes place in its own timeline anyway. So it wouldn't matter. Huh. I don't know. I don't know why he's not Reinhardt Belmont. What the fuck? Get on the ledge. There we go. So the clock tower level is also home to a boss fight. It's where you have your last battle with the camera. In the clock tower, you have absolutely no control over the camera. There's no like action battle normal. There's no like anything. The camera is just kind of gonna go where it wants to go. And you just have to sort of like deal with it. You can't do anything to control it. I suspect, I didn't realize this when I played it, but having played Legacy of Darkness, I suspect that this level is just kind of unfinished. I mean, the game's unfinished, but this level in particular I think is unfinished. Because the clock tower is much more involved in Legacy of Darkness. And you can even control the camera. So here, the fact that the camera's non-functioning and that this is like much more pared down compared to the Legacy of Darkness clock tower makes me suspect that. But honestly, like, I don't really have any problems with this clock tower level as it exists. It does only consist of 3 rooms, but I don't think it really needs any more than that. And they're all, I think sufficiently tense, because the fact that you can't control the camera means, like I said earlier, it's like the final fight against the camera. It creates like a sense of danger and disorientation, even though the platforming that's going on is not particularly complicated. But I guess I can understand how the devs wouldn't want to make a level where like the biggest hazard is the camera. Even though that's like still, well, no, in Legacy of Darkness has different problems. Anyway, yeah, even though it's like only 3 rooms, and it's pretty short. It's still pretty tense, so I think it's fine. Mm. Wow, I can't believe I went for that. Although at this point, I think with how high up I am, if I'm at full health, if I fell off back there, I probably wouldn't have died instantly. If I fall off up here, I die, but not down there. So I don't know. Come on, come on. There we go. Now the final climb up the staircase to Dracula's lair. Yeah, I was talking about the Grim Reaper fight back there. The biggest hazard is the fact he's constantly summoning scythes. Uh, Means that it's hard to get the game to put the little targeting reticle on the Grim Reaper instead of the scythes, because you don't really have any control over that. It just kind of picks whatever is closest to you as the target of your attacks, usually, unless it picked something else before, and then like it kind of has a bad habit of like sticking to it when like you might want to attack something else. I don't know. The combat in this game is deeply flawed. Which is why I'm glad that it never gets too like hectic or complicated. Yeah, sorry guys, no Renan boss fight. I already explained why. In the first part, for what it's worth, I think I already said this too. He is identical to the death fight. I think he even teleports you to the same place to fight him. Excuse me. Peculiar character, and also he has a funny line there which he says, impending global war, millions of deaths. This game takes place in 1852. I mean, presumably, when you hear global war and millions of deaths, you think of World War One, right? So, but impending, 1852. When did I don't know? I don't remember when World War One started, like down to the date, but I know it's like 19. It's like 1914, 1915. American education. I don't remember what year exactly, but it's like 1910s. So 60 years is not exactly impending. It makes you wonder if they like, I mean, unless did some fucking horrible war happen in Europe in 1852 and I just don't know about it because I'm American? Is that like, is that what that's about, or is this just like they wanted to set it later and then didn't? Because setting it later would also explain the motorcycles, presumably. I feel for some reason like 1898 motorcycles seems more believable to me than 1852 motorcycles, even though I have no knowledge or evidence to back up that gut feeling. Hum-de dum dum dum. What's going on now? Dracula's coming up. Oh no, he's out there somewhere. Turned into smoke. Ho ho ho. They really... The laughter in this game is inconsistent. I've noticed that before. There he is, the man himself. Looking pretty worn out. I guess I would be too. At this point, he's died like what? 1, 2, 3, 4 times? By a conservative estimate. 5 if you count Belmont's Revenge, I guess. Even though this does take place in an alternate timeline, so I don't know. Whatever, that timeline shit doesn't matter. Somewhat less eloquent than his Symphony of the Night Incarnation. So here I actually do swap to Battle View, because even though I've said that the different camera modes are mostly not helpful, Battle View, as you can see here, is pretty good at kind of making the camera go towards Dracula. And here, because he's teleporting all over the place, and he can teleport, like, he could end up like right behind you or like anywhere. This is a good context to have that on for. Interestingly, Dracula here has kind of he's kind of like the Dracula X. It's kind of like the Dracula X Dracula fight where He has a very picky hitbox. Like, there was an attack back there where he did like a fire halo and it hit me. And you'll notice that I actually did jump and whip him when he did that, but I didn't register a hit on him because he had his like hands above his head for the animation of the attack, so that like blocked my whip swing. So that's pretty annoying, I have to say. And the reason it's like Dracula X is because in Dracula X, Dracula just has like a very specific like part of his body where he could be damaged. Like it's usually the head, but in Dracula X, it's like his neck, chin area. It's like really specific. I don't know. I see ho 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 and I think of Santa Claus. I probably would not have said that there. This part is weird, because it really seems for all the world like he's about to transform and go into phase 2. But instead he doesn't. He just kind of explodes. I don't know if they intended to have a phase 2 for this Dracula fight or what, but... Or like maybe they ran out of time for it or something. But instead he just explodes, and pretty soon the castle's gonna start collapsing. I don't really have much to say about that Dracula fight. I mean, it's actually a perfect translation of the 2D Dracula fights to 3D, where you just like jump and whip him over and over again. Although there's no real dodging component because whipping him interrupts his attack, so it's even easier. And I'm pretty grateful for that, because I feel like having to like time jumps to dodge an attack and like look at him in time to whip him would be really fucking hard. It's really like it's because you know what it is? In 3D games, looking at something becomes like an action, and it becomes something that takes up time and takes up like attention and takes up energy. In 2D games you just see everything, but in 3D games you have to look at things, if that makes sense. Oh shit, everything's collapsing. It's just like Metroid. You have to get out before the ceiling caves in, before the castle collapses. I hope Dark Samus doesn't show up. Oh fuck, it's Dark Samus. God damn it. What did I say? I don't know how an arrow gets embedded in stone steps. Maybe it's just that strong. Oh shit. It's the evil, creepy little kid from before. He's riding upon a winged unicorn. How mysterious. So, what you're supposed to do at the end here is jump off to the left onto that little, like, elevator. I didn't know that the first time I got here, so I just stood on the stairs and then died. I think I just didn't see the elevator somehow, or I didn't, like, register that it was there. I thought maybe I was supposed to go, like, back through the door or something. Whatever. Anyway. That's not what you're supposed to do. What you're supposed to do is take the elevator and get up here. Mysterious. It's Galamoth. Malice is an anagram of Galamoth. That proves it. When I first got to this part and I saw that he was like on a horse flying around, I was like, oh my fucking god, if they make me fight this little shit while he's like flying around on a horse all over the place, I'm gonna fucking throw the controller out the window. Because like I can't imagine trying to fight like trying to fight a really fast evasive enemy that's on the ground is already a fucking gigantic pain in the ass in this game. So trying to fight a fast evasive enemy that is flying around in the air in this game would be like even worse. There actually is a boss kind of like that in Legacy of Darkness, but Legacy of Darkness did clean up a lot of the underlying issues that Castlevania 64 had. Fortunately, you don't fight him on the horse. He doesn't start flying around and shooting arrows at you, which is what I was deathly afraid of. Instead, he turns into Sephiroth. Except he's wearing slightly different clothes. Yeah, so this is the real Dracula. That old dude in the castle who was exactly like Dracula was not really Dracula. You might be wondering who that was then that we killed up there. There's your answer, my servant, the guardian of my sleeping spirit, which is not really a very good answer. there's a lot about this game that's not really adequately explained, and Legacy of Darkness does a little bit more of that explaining, but to be honest, I don't need that much of an explanation. It's a little funny that you fight like a fake Dracula. Like, that's pretty weird, but um, other than that, like I don't need like a giant exposition dump or anything. So this fight, I basically spent my whole time with Castlevania 64. It wasn't until I started playing Legacy of Darkness that I figured out how you're actually supposed to play this fight, which is that so Sephiroth will teleport to one of like he'll either teleport to one of the four edges of the arena here, or he'll teleport like somewhere in the middle. If he's teleporting out to the edge, he always shoots the three purple fire bats at you. If he goes into the middle, sometimes he can do trickier shit. But the key here, like the key mistake that I'm making, is that I'm like looking for him when he teleports and then just trying to run towards him, which is not what you're supposed to do. When he teleports, he makes like there's like a whooshing sound that happens, and the whooshing sound travels in the direction that he's going to teleport. So if you just stay in one place and keep the camera facing in one direction while he does that, you can tell just by listening where he's going to be, because you can hear like a whoosh off to your left or a whoosh off to your right or something like that. I heard the whooshing when I fought him in this game, but because I was constantly like spinning the camera around, I never picked up on the fact that it had any like spatial component to it. I thought that was just like the sound of his teleports. So if I had paid a little bit more attention, I might have been better about that, or this early footage wouldn't be so god awful. But oh well. Hey, it's a combat challenge that's like actually hitting me. So what do you know? Actually making me like use healing items. Yeah, I actually did look up a boss guide on Game FAQs, and I don't know if you guys have ever like tried to look up like Game FAQs stuff from like the year like 1999, like stuff that was posted in the year like 2000 or 1999, but like a lot of what I found about this game was just extraordinarily unhelpful. Like, if I had read the boss guide, but I looked up the boss guide to figure something else out. I can't remember what right now off the top of my head, but in the boss guide it mentions the whooshing thing. So if I had, that actually was an important detail, and if I had looked that up, if I had read that, that would have informed me of that. But there were some things that I encountered in Legacy of Darkness that I tried to like look up help with and just got absolutely nothing for. And as I think I may have already mentioned, the good and bad endings to this game, if you get the bad ending, you don't get this last Dracula fight. Lots of guides repeat the four sun moon card thing, which is not true. I think I already said this. Wow, this is like boring as fuck. I'm like not fighting this guy at all. You know, it's funny, when I got out of the death fight and I looked at the timestamp for the video file, I'm like, I've still got half an hour left. What am I gonna fucking do for half an hour? All I got is like the clock tower and the Dracula fight. Oh, it's because the Dracula fight takes forever because I'm garbage at it. Oh well, sorry guys. Dracula, like every other enemy in the game, takes more damage during the daytime, so if you have a stray sun card, you should basically always be fighting Dracula during the daytime. If you're not going to... See, I feel like I should have hit him there. For some reason, the whip hit, like, his shoulder, even though I was, like, jumping up to head height and whipping him. I don't know. Yeah, you should... And if you're not going to, like, listen for the whoosh, then the next thing that makes any sense to do is... Look at that shit. It's, like, glitched out. It's, like, rendering on top of him. Is to just camp one spot and wait for him to show up. If I really felt like I couldn't, yeah. And even if you were concerned about the time limit for the bad ending, you can't trigger the bad ending once you start this second Dracula fight. I don't really know when the cutoff is, but due to the nature of the bad ending and what constitutes the bad ending, past a certain point, you can't get it anymore. It's not like if you reach too many days, the game says like, oh wait, like in the middle of this fight, the game goes, oh wait, on second thought, we're canceling this fight. Yeah, I got the bad ending now. Not how it works. I guess I guess it's like whipping at the apex of your jump is what makes it work. If I just tried to jump and whip, it seemed like I was mostly hitting him in like the upper arm, shoulder, but then if I waited till the very, very top of the jump to whip, it's like you're whipping down onto his head, and there's more of a chance of it actually connecting. So that was a pretty harrowing boss fight, but it was only really as long as it was because I was playing it very, very badly. I hope I do better on hard mode. I have a feeling I won't. Oh good, he's normal again. You were possessed by Sephiroth. Now let's get you back, let's get you back home. Oh wait. Oh my god, the kid's on fire. He's on blue fire. Cold fire. Yes, the guy with the mustache from all the way back in the villa. He hasn't shown up for, what? Fucking 2 hours or something? But he's here now, and he's gonna save the day. Oh my god, the kid was really Sephiroth the whole time. There was no possession. I don't get how that works exactly, but that is basically what he said. I return in the body of this child. It's a reincarnation, I suppose. Oh shit. Now we get the real phase 2 of Dracula. So even though the way that the boss fights in this game go at the end is you fight a fake Dracula, then real Dracula, then real Dracula phase 2, I tend to think of it as like one big Dracula fight with 3 phases. So sometimes I'll refer to like the first fight in the Castle Keep room as phase 1, then the Sephiroth fight is phase 2, then this part is phase 3. And phase 3 of Dracula is probably it is the most dangerous combat section in the game, and it's mostly because of just how much raw damage he does. Like, he has some attacks that can knock off like half of your health at once. If you're gonna save up, so if there's any like purpose to healing items, it's to give yourself a good like safety cushion when you get to this fight. And this is a pretty creative like monster Dracula design too. I should praise them for that. It doesn't really look like any of the other well, he kind of looks like, you know, the Rondo Cookie Monster thing at the top half, but then he's got the weird like centipede legs, which is an interesting iteration on the design. So pretty cool, pretty cool. He's back and he's pissed. So the thing about the Dracula fight that makes it difficult is twofold. For one, it's not hard at first. At first it's pretty straightforward, because it's pretty easy to get behind him and then stay behind him, and then maybe try to adjust to his attacks. The issue is that the camera, when you get too close to him, the camera changes perspective, which affects your movement. That's one problem. The second problem comes when you get him down to half HP, because he'll summon these 2 like fire serpents that fly around. Yeah, there they are. And I don't know what like the deal with these things is. I think they're killable, but I don't know how you would do that. And they just kind of fly around all over the place and blindside you, and are very difficult to like get out of the way of. And then on top of that, they're constantly making dinosaur sounds in your ear while you're trying to like play the fucking game. So this is when the fight gets like really chaotic and annoying and brutal. Because you basically always have to keep moving, so you constantly have to do these like circuits going away from Dracula and back towards Dracula, with the caveat that like you could always end up being bumped into by a serpent. Look at him fucking turning all the way towards me. God damn. With the caveat that you guys just get like bumped into by a serpent from off the screen. And also while it's making these fucking dinosaur noises in your ear fucking non-stop. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, here I start using the cross just so that way I don't have to cover as much ground to a close distance with him. Whether or not the cross is going to hit him, there's no real visual indicator of whether or not the game has noticed that you're trying to hit him with the cross or not. So you just kind of have to like turn towards him and then just kind of throw and just kind of hope. And I think the cross, yeah, the cross is also going to the fire serpents too, which is why the cross is a good option for this guy, because I don't, again, like trying to target Dracula is imprecise, so trying to target the fire serpents is like even worse. But I think the cross might sometimes ricochet off Dracula and go to the serpents. I don't really know. I can't really tell. Anyway, he's dead. Yeah, so I don't have, like, whenever I talk about this phase of Dracula, excuse me, because like I said, I have other runs that I want to commentate. Whenever I talk about this phase of Dracula, I don't really have strategies or advice. I have what I would call theories about the boss and how it works and why. And that's a common problem with Castlevania 64 is how opaque a lot of the behavior of the enemies is, and why I think one of several reasons why I think they decided to focus more on the platforming. And it's because, you know, in a 3D game, that's kind of the big novelty, right? That doesn't make sense. 3D platforming and 3D combat are both pretty much equally revolutionary. Never mind. This is a cool little death animation. You know what this reminds you of? This reminds me of, like, boss death animations in JRPGs. You know, like, you could play a JRPG and you kill the final boss and he has, like, a death animation that takes, like, fucking a million years to complete? That's what this is like. Making some fucking creepy-ass noises, too. This part's really good. I like this ending. Because like, the music feels like... It doesn't feel super, like, triumphant. It feels very, like, dark and mysterious and menacing, and it keeps on making those weird-ass noises. Well, it descends into, presumably, the pit of hell. I guess that's what that's supposed to be. Out here in this, like, nuclear wasteland, wherever the hell you are. And it ends. Dracula is no more. Another reason, I knew part of the reason why I had half an hour left after I got out of the Tower of Execution, or after I got out of the Room of Clocks, was because this game kind of takes its time getting to the finish line. It's daytime now. The weather changed. And the whole fucking island the castle is on is collapsing. Isn't this like a thing, like a castle on an island in a lake? I know that's what Skullomance in World of Warcraft is like, but I feel like that's based on, like, a real thing. Or an existing, like, mythological thing. Not mythological, like, local legend thing? Well, I mean, in the novel Dracula, they say Dracula learned black magic from Satan at the Skullomance, which I think is supposed to be some kind of legendary, like, or, like, quasi-real, or no, fake satanic magic school. Whatever, I'm fucking rambling now. Look at that, rose petals are falling from the sky. Oh shit, would you look at that? God was so happy with me for killing Dracula that he did me a solid and returned my vampire GF to life. This part's a little much, I think. I think it's a bit, like... And it's weird that, like, part of the wreckage of the castle is still there, because I feel like usually when Castlevania gets destroyed, the whole thing just, like, crumbles into nothingness, but whatever. It seems a little out of character for God to, like, perform a wholesale resurrection like that and just return someone to life. But, oh well. It creates a picturesque happy ending, so I'm okay with it. This is like dialogue from the end of, like, a 50s science fiction movie. Oh god, how does that one thing go? Oh fuck, how does it go? Damn! Okay, there's a lightning storm happening outside. I just looked outside my window and saw a sick-ass bolt of lightning across the sky. I don't think I've ever seen that before. It's pretty cool. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting distracted. How does it? There's this one 50s B movie that has like this really long ending monologue that I think is that's like really funny. It's like some mystery science theater movie, and I can't remember how it's. How does it go? Man is something about man is a feeling creature. He forgot. He forgot something. Man is a feeling creature. Okay, I'm gonna actually look this up while the heroic music swells and Rosa and Reinhardt look out on the sunrise over the tranquil lake and embrace a new dawn where we eventually will have to fight Dracula again, but oh well, I wouldn't have it any other way. Oh, he learned too... Yeah, that's it. He learned too late that man is a feeling creature. Fuck, I almost want to... I almost want to, like, put the audio for that into this now. Maybe I'll do that in the next video. No, fuck it, I should just do it for this one. Maybe I'll just, like, edit this in somewhere. How long is it? Hopefully I don't get copyright struck for this fucking video from 1954 or whatever. Okay, it's only about a minute. Hopefully I don't get copyright struck for it.
You learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature. And because of it, the greatest in the universe. He learned too late for himself that men have to find their own way to make their own mistakes. There can't be any gift of perfection from outside ourselves. And when men seek such perfection, they find only death, fire, loss, disillusionment, and the end of everything that's gone forward. Men have always sought an end through toil and misery. It can't be given, it has to be achieved. There is hope, but it has to come from inside. The man himself.
Oh, man. I love that. I love that so much. I can't believe I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, that's from a movie called I just closed out the tab. I can't remember what it's called. Fuck. Hang on. It Conquered the World, Roger Corman movie. Yeah. I'm gonna end every video of mine playing that, by the way, and I'm gonna start every video with that too from now on. You're gonna hear that every single time you click on a video on my channel. You're gonna hear that whole thing, so just kind of prepare yourself for that. Anyway, Castlevania 64. Like I said, I think this game's kind of good, and that's very like cautious praise because I have to square that with how many problems it has, and it's kind of exactly the opposite of how I feel about something like Portrait of Ruin or Bloodlines. Like, those are two games that are both like I have a really hard time, like, I don't really like them. Like, when I bring them up in my mind, it doesn't really elicit very many positive feelings, but I have a hard time pinpointing anything they're really doing wrong. With Castlevania 64, it's kind of the opposite. Like, this game just kind of makes me smile most of the time. There are some exceptions. I have gotten frustrated sometimes playing this game, but most of the time it's like it has all these obvious problems, but for some reason it doesn't matter. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just because the whole thing is so earnest, you know? It's so, like, sincere, and it's so, like, excited for the new technology, and it's unfinished, which gives it kind of a scrappy underdog kind of feel. I don't know. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. More coming soon. Keep on Earth rocking.